So, congratulations on making it to the third and final creative project for the semester. We're going to talk about the minimum requirements for the project as well as the creative angle for this project and what it is and what is not. And hopefully, you'll enjoy this very visually oriented Photoshop creative project that's a bit different from what we did with the CD cover and with the book cover. With those first two projects, we focused largely on typography and layout skills combined with photographic imagery. And we are still using typography, we are still using layout skills, but for the most part, this project focuses on Photoshop photo image retouching that is pretty much exclusive to the world of Photoshop. So we're talking about using Photoshop skills to focus on creating new vibrant imagery that could not be created without the tool itself. In other words, images that could not have just been captured. So for this project, you do not want to just find a clever photograph from the web and put some text on it. You're not going to pass the project. You're going to get a D for that, okay? If anybody just throws a pre-captured photograph that you did not create and put some text on it, you got a D for the project because you it's not a passing grade for that. You can't really do something that simple. You need to build the work your own. You need to make it through Photoshop. Okay, so let's take a look at some examples. So on the professional side, I think this is a really good way to look at it. We've got, let me just close this here. Tyler Hampton, back in 2006, did this campaign called Non-Native Species of the California Coast. And what this was a mock sort of group of trading cards that he created using Photoshop to create animals that don't really exist for visual effect. So for example, you have the egret turned into the sig egret. And you notice that at first it looks like, when you look at the image, it looks like a conventional wildlife photograph taken in the field of a snowy egret. And when you look closer, you realize, oh, something's wrong with the beak. And then you realize, oh, it's actually a cigarette butt. And then when you start to combine that with the text, you start to understand what we're looking at. It says non-native species, and it takes a little thought, but once you look at it, you realize, oh, okay, now I understand it. So the image shocks you enough into digging deeper and learning more about the cause. And through Photoshop, you're able to create a unique campaign that makes people aware of a particular problem. Now, in this case, it's an environmental problem. It could be a social problem, such as racism or racial injustice. It could be a health issue that you want to call awareness to. So it could be really any kind of social cause you can think of. So to dig deeper into the campaign, here's an example of all the cards as a poster and displayed on a bus stop. This is part of the campaign. Here's an example of what one of the cards actually would have looked like. And let's just take a look deeper at some of the Photoshop work. So here's yet another card. This one is the colobus. So obviously you have a fish combined with some aluminum. Again, designed to provoke, draw attention, and then causes you to dig a little bit deeper. So let's take a look at some of these others. Next up, we've got the muffler eel. Maybe I can zoom in a little bit. There we go. The muffler eel here again. So we have this discarded muffler sitting at the bottom of what we think is either the ocean or a lake. And there's the eel head there coming out. So new animal. The spork crab. So here we can see we've got some styrofoam mixed with a crab to create this new creature. And the radial turtle, radial tire here. And again, nice lighting. So the image really kind of, at first looks like there's nothing wrong. And then when you look at it a little bit longer, you realize what's going on and you get the title and you kind of get the big picture. So this is an example of a professional campaign that uses Photoshop to draw attention to a cause. Let's take a look at some student examples from Cerritos College. So here I've got Photoshop ready to go, and here's a student project. You see that we've got several animals, and again, this is kind of shocking. You see these syringes there in the animals, and in this case, we're drawing attention not to trash or environmental cleanup, but from the abuse of laboratory animals. And so this is not just an image that was downloaded from the web and then you slap some text on it. Now, it might look that way because the student's done a really good job of using Photoshop to combine all these different images together to make one cohesive image in which it's quite shocking and attention getting. But it's not about violence, or it's not about trying to just scare or shock people with blood and guts and gory imagery. It's about drawing attention so that it gets noticed while forcing people to think and dig deeper. So in this case, let's deal with the Photoshop mechanics, and this gets into what you need to do for this project in order to get a passing grade. So you'll notice that this student has used different layers to create this overall image. So you have different syringes for the animals, and you notice the layers are labeled. You have the hand, which is again not part of the image. And then you have the different animals. So it all begins with this bunny background element, but then you add the mouse, you add the guinea pig, and eventually the syringes in the hand. But you also notice that you can see when I turn these layers off, there's a lot of adjustments going on. So it's not just as simple as cutting and pasting, selecting really carefully. There is all that, but there's also adjustment layers and layer effects that make all of this seamless. And so what you need to do will, of course, vary based upon your particular needs for the project. But you'll notice that, for example, there's an exposure adjustment to make that background darker, and masks to carefully make sure that that exposure adjustment does not affect the animals, but just the background. And so this is what I'm looking for. I'm looking for all of this in your mini posters. I'm not looking for a completed photograph that someone else did with some text on it that you slapped on. So, if you're looking for an A, B, C type grade, that's what you need to do. Now, if you use multiple images and you use Photoshop effectively, it doesn't guarantee you an A. It's not what I'm saying. What I'm saying is, if you want an A, you're going to need to have a clever idea. You're going to need to utilize 5 or more image layers. 5 or more. And you're going to need to use adjustment layers to achieve your goal. Now, obviously, there's a creative component as well, but from a technical perspective, you'll need those things in place. So if you're giving me less than that, just be aware, you're probably not going to get an A or a B in terms of your grade. It just depends on your project, but for the most part, anything that's less than 5 images is going to get a C or less. But again, don't just slap some text on a photo. So we want to go ahead and think about what kind of images would work for your cause, or perhaps maybe start with the images before the cause. It really is up to you in terms of how you would go about preparing for the project. But students have done different things that have been quite clever and successful. Let's take a look. Here's one that they've done to draw attention to an eco-friendly car by showing the reflection of the factory into the car using masking, using adjustment layers, using multiple smoke elements and different photographs to complete this car image. Let's take a look. In this case, using different images together to create this very jarring image, very attention-getting image of the cell phone as a rear view mirror almost, or a cell phone camera, if you will, of this truck about to hit the car. And again, it's very visual. It's like this phrase, "it only takes a second," is not telling us don't text and drive. Okay, that would be the easy way out, or don't drink and drive, or whatever. It's not about pointing the obvious to the viewer. You want to be clever about your phrase, your text. So "it only takes a second" just reminds people that this is really a split-second moment in which everything can go wrong, but it's really the visuals that communicate. It's like this itself doesn't mean much of anything. That could mean a lot of different things, but when you combine that with this very jarring Photoshop-produced image, and you can see the radial blur in there, it's a lot of work going on. It's very effective. So anyway, this is what we're after. We're trying to create images that are unique, that grab the audience's attention, but are also very effective visual communicators and elements that use Photoshop skills to communicate with the viewer in lots of different ways. So here's another example. In this case, we have an example of something that's using hand-drawn artwork. So it doesn't necessarily have to be photographic in nature. You can still use elements that are combined, but these are all different layers, all different elements that have been adjusted to create this overall piece of art. So in this case, you're using text a little bit more. It's probably not quite as effective as the others, to be honest, but I just want to give you the sense that there are other options out there in terms of creating this poster, but just make sure you use 5 different elements, either photographic or hand-drawn, or photograph image layers. Basically, it doesn't have to be a photograph, but typically with Photoshop it is. But you want 5 different image elements and then adjustment layers to help bring it all together and make it cohesive. So I wish you best of luck with the project. I hope it's fun. It's the most visual project we've done this semester, and it really gives you, I think, a good opportunity to practice your Photoshop skills and build something that is a great calling card for your ability to use the software, but also to be creative and to communicate visually.